feeds and all that. So
Well,
just lay the groundwork out for me as you
Yeah.
see it.
So, okay, so we covered a lot of this. We were kind of right.
We're coming up to the cliff. Last time you were standing on the edge looking
Yeah.
down.
No, last
into the
time
abyss.
it was not sure. I was not sure which way it was going to go, and it can go any way at any time. Like that's kind of the who knows what's going to happen. So it's been going on since 2016. The situation. A bunch of people at Mount Royal who are identity politics people, which we did coexist, and that's the thing I was talking to Mount Royal about, is that I'm perfectly happy to coexist with these people. I'm not, I don't have any, like, I know that it's a bit uncomfortable for everyone, but I sort of, I'm happy to go back in there and, you know, ask my questions and so on, and they're not going to like them, and fine, that's no problem for me. But Mount Royal at the end thinks it's unviable. Like that's what they told. They don't think that it's viable. Anyway, so this thing that's been going on since 2016, a bunch of faculty members would be defaming me in various ways, and I would ask them for evidence of what they were talking about. That's all I did, and I didn't complain about them. I just, well, I sent notices to the administration telling them that the way they were going about things with their indigenization policy was creating a poisonous environment. That was what it was doing, and they should be aware of this. And here was some examples of how it was creating a poisonous environment, because they're saying things like, you should value and respect Indigenous ways of knowing. And I would question how, for example, Indigenous science, what was called Indigenous science, was going to be incorporated into the science curriculum. Like, how are you going to do this? For example, there was a talk given by a guy by the name of Gregory Kahete at the University of Calgary, who was talking about star knowledge, Indigenous star knowledge. So I recorded this, fortunately, I recorded this talk. This is right when I started to get the recorder going, which my advisors were telling me, don't ever say anything publicly unless you record it, because you're going to get nailed. Like this is going to happen. And I'm going, you know, it'll be fine. I was very naive. So I got this recorder and I recorded this session, and it was about Indigenous stars. So I asked a question. So I don't quite understand what you mean when you're saying it should be incorporated, because Indigenous star knowledge is pre-telescope. And, you know, people know that after the telescope was discovered, then astronomy became much more detailed and so on. So are you talking about just studying how Indigenous people saw the stars? Is it kind of an anthropological thing, or do you think it can be incorporated into the astronomy classes, the actual astronomy classes? That was basically the question that I had asked. Anyway, an Indigenous scholar thought this was very insulting to the elder, to Kahete, and that this was, you know, that I should be, I guess, disciplined for this. Like, so that's the sort of thing that started to go on, is that people were demanding that Mount Royal stop me from doing this, or get me investigated for doing this. Anyway, so, and I would ask questions like this every single event. So I'd go to these events and ask questions like that. And people are becoming more and more angry about it and saying, this is anti-Indigenous, this is hate speech, this, like, things like that. And Mount Royal should have just said, well, you guys are entitled to your, and that was my position too. Like, if you want to, are you in favor of Indigenous star knowledge and so on, fine. And incorporating it into the astronomy curriculum, fine. But, you know, at an event, when you're talking about it, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to need to articulate what you're talking about. Anyway, that is now perceived as being harassment and hate speech and discrimination, these sorts of things. So that's what's kind of happening And so Mount Royal's kind of hadn't really said anything about it, like specifically, but they said something like, we support academic freedom and open inquiry, but our employees are entitled to work in a workplace that is free from harassment and discrimination. So they're kind of implying that I was engaged in harassment and discrimination in the workplace, and all I was doing is asking questions. So that was the one kind of aspect. The other, of course, is,
just to interrupt you, there's sort of, different ways to ask questions. How would you characterize, were your questions, sort of politely worded and in an academic way, or you can, it's possible to ask sarcastic questions or, dripping with resentment, or I mean, I'm not saying that's what you did. How would you? I'm just asking you to characterize.
They're claiming that I'm relentless. That's one accusation. I'm relentless.
Yeah.
And that I have ill intent with my questions. So that's,
is that a quote, or are you summarizing?
Well, it's never said about, like, I was at an event. Like, the other amusing thing is that although I'm no longer an employee at Mount Royal, I'm still a member of the faculty association for a year. So I can go to all the events of the faculty association and continue my relentless my relentless approach. It's just, I don't, like, they think the matter's settled, like it's all done and we're just moving ahead and know what now. It's like the earth has been found to be round, and we have a flat earther who's coming to all the events and demanding that the roundness of the earth be explained. Like that, that's kind of how I'm treated, when it's like no one has ever articulated why this is beneficial. So I can't move forward when we don't have a rationale for why any of this is going to help the academic mandate. So they claim, I have recordings of everything, all the questions that I've asked. So I don't, and generally investigators have agreed that there is nothing wrong with what I was asking. But Mount Royal has, even though that was found as not to be harassment, they've now inserted that it is in the end. So they're trying to get me. They're trying to set me up, I'm sure, but they want me out, and they find this is not good for harmony of the university, and the "you belong here" brand is not working out with respect to that. But I'm saying to them, look, the problem here is that you have people who cannot accept that their perspective is going to be critically analyzed. They want it to be promoted. They don't want it to be questioned. And I can't promote it because I don't see it as, so far, like I could be convinced otherwise, but I've been looking at this 25 years. So I think I've heard all the arguments that there are there, and there is no, there's no benefit to the science curriculum by incorporating Indigenous STAR knowledge into the science curriculum. That's not going to be beneficial. And, having an elder take students on a camp and tell them the reason why the trees are coming out of dormancy in the spring is because the birds are singing to them. That's what the elder thinks. So that's not going to benefit the biology students. It's not going to benefit Indigenous students. This is just condescending and is not honest, and is going to backfire in a huge way when, well, once we do have a reckoning, whenever that is. But I keep on expecting the scientific community to start to rise up and to say, this is not good for scientific research to have this kind of, these kinds of arguments being accepted without question. So that's sort of what has happened. And then the social media is the other side. So that is kind of what got me nailed, because they're claiming that my Twitter stuff is workplace. So like, I thought, because I had been defamed on social media for years and no one ever done anything about it, that social media was not considered to be a workplace issue for Mount Royal. That was
Had you ever complained? Have you ever complained when your colleagues defamed
Yes.
you on Twitter?
Yes, for 4 years. Like, I
And
didn't
what-
complain. I told the university, look, I'm a free speech advocate. I don't want to be going to, daddy to get them to control what people do on their social media accounts. But you need to realize that an environment is being created that is poisonous for me, because it's basically being argued that I don't have a right to make these arguments because this is in contradiction to MRU's official position. Like, MRU's come out with an indigenization plan, which says this, that is what Mount Royal's all about. And then we have Francis Widdowson, who's criticizing the incorporation of this. So it puts me in a very difficult position, what you're doing here. And they just ignored that. And they said, well, if you want to make a complaint, you can go ahead and do it. But that's not how these policies work, is that the employer is responsible for, creating an environment that is, healthy and so on and so forth. So, but I didn't, well, I minded because I knew it was going to undermine me, but I thought I just would live with it and just whatever. But when some faculty members the mob began to form, and then they started to try to mobilize this anonymous student group, and there was these anonymous accounts, that's when I started to satirize these anonymous accounts. The other thing too is, I'm not sure if you've seen it, I'll send it to you, but it was a satirical letter on the attempts to bring in mandatory anti-racism training at Mount Royal in, I guess it was June, after the George Floyd killing. There was this movement to have all sorts of anti-racism initiatives. A number of faculty members were arguing against it and were being ignored. And so I thought it would be an interesting tack to do a satirical response to this. And I posted on my Facebook page a satirical letter on July 1st, saying that George Orwell had come to me in a dream and told me that although he knew I was a fan of his, I was on the wrong path. And he had now found out that it was postmodern intersectional theory that was the right way. And so I had decided now that after doing a territorial land acknowledgement, praying to the creator, posting my pronouns on Twitter, and adding an condemnation of racism to my syllabi, that of what the right course of action would be. And this would be to develop an oppression point system. And you would apply points on the basis of whether you're white, male, cisgender. And those who have higher than the 3.5 score on the impression point system should resign. Like, they're supporters of this, and they should resign to make room for the BIPOC scholars who are trying to, elbow their way into the system. Anyway, so that, and I applied it to all the people who had signed the letter. I didn't use their names, I blocked out their names, but I just showed, there's 62 who had signed it. And I showed, like, a lot of them were highly privileged and high up on the, anyway, that was found to be harassment. Although it was on my private account, it wasn't addressed to anyone. It was like a generic satirical thing about, targeting on the basis of these kinds of identity characteristics, and how there was hypocrisy, because none of these white male cis full professors are ever going to resign their positions to open up those positions for.
Were they identifiable? You said you blocked out their names. How could it be harassment? How could they complain if it was impossible to identify them?
Because it was satirizing a viewpoint that people, my colleagues, found to be demeaning.
Is that so I guess we should, is this the one specific, like you've been talking in generalities about the kind of building storm. Was there one, what precipitated the December 20th decision then? Was there that one particular investigation?
Well, it was like accumulation, because
Yeah.
they wanted me to back down, like they wanted me to stop. And, I guess, I don't know what, like I said, that's the thing, is that I don't think it's gonna work because I'm targeted, like they want me out and they're gonna find a way to do it. So I just said, no, the more you try to do this, the more I'm gonna lean in. Like I'm not gonna, they give me directions, like they'd say, you cannot direct your satire at any member of the MRU community. So you can't, like, because I was kind of doing that when my colleagues were trying to get me fired. I was satirizing their attempts to get me fired and congratulating them enthusiastically that this was great what they were doing. And yes, that you should get rid of that hateful harasser and that epistemic terrorist. That's just great.
This your Francis McGrath Twitter feed?
Yeah, so I was doing that, but I was using their words. Like they were saying I was an epistemic terrorist.
Yeah.
And I would use the word epistemic terrorist to refer to me. But because I would tag them on Twitter and say, yes, good, congratulations, clap, 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 so-and-so, their Twitter handle, that was seen as harassment because I was specifically tagging them. But then when I got the directive not to do that, I stopped doing that. And I just was doing satirical things. But I was doing very edgy, sad, like seriously, and then that got everyone really angry at my content. And then that was claimed to create a culture of fear in the university, and that I, like it was the ideas in the end that was people found to be very upsetting. So I wasn't gonna give, start to give concede ground. I did follow the directives, but that didn't matter in the end because it was found to, some of my colleagues found that they felt it was ridiculing their perspective, which, like, I didn't know we were not allowed to ridicule perspectives. That was sort of I don't know. I don't understand. And to this day, Mount Royal's never been able to clearly articulate what it expects on social media. So it was just kind of a moving target designed to kind of catch me in some kind of net, which I wasn't. I was just going to continue to,
Can you share that directive you said you received? Is that something that's
I'm not
terrible?
sure.
No? Okay.
See, these official, so what I've been told by the union is I'm trying to be reinstated. So that's my demand, is that I want to be reinstated. And so if I'm going to be reinstated, I have to show that my relationship is viable still, which may never be the case anyway. Like, I don't know, like it depends on them. I don't see it as I told people, I don't understand why people think this is unviable. Like, I'm perfectly happy. Everything's going well as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm teaching and everything's going well, and I'm doing my research, and I go to these meetings and ask questions, and people get a little bit kind of annoyed about it, but like they're entitled to get annoyed, and I don't mind. So what's the problem? It's like, well, the social media, but it's like, okay, so social media is now work. So everything that everyone does on social media is now going to be up for complaints, because, like, I'm sure that there's some social media things that are going on that I find to be very offensive and that are bothersome to me. So does that mean that I get to complain on all those things? Like, so this is all unknown, but it's all going to arbitration. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going to arbitration that eventually is going to be overseen by a neutral, supposedly neutral arbiter, and then that can be decided. But yeah.
Are you surprised the union is backing you? That's one fear, isn't it? That unions will just drop people and then you're left without any. So do you find that heartening that the arbitration?
Yeah, so the union is a very good union. And actually, I've been involved quite, like, that's another good thing about my case, is that I was actively involved with the union. So that's a great benefit. You know, of course, there's members of the executive who are, well, 3 of them were celebrating my termination, which I thought was highly inappropriate, but they're evidently not, they're recusing themselves, so they're not involved. But still, that worries me when you see that kind of thing happening. Like, you should know, if you're a member of the executive, that you're there to represent all members, regardless of your, regardless of your own personal views. So that's a bit disturbing. But still, that doesn't matter in the end, as long as the union itself is intact, which it seems is the case. It's a very complicated case because it has all sorts of dimensions to it. And as well, so in these policies, they're delegated governmental authority. So they have to be, when they try to, manage you under these policies, it's got to be done according to the principles of administrative law, which is procedural fairness. And Mount Royal has just totally botched all the procedures. Like, for example, for one complaint, or a couple, I never even received the complaint. I was like, well, that's number one. Like, before we, they said, well, I'm not going to participate unless you give me the complaint. That's kind of what you would tend to respond with.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, if you don't participate, you're going to get disciplined. It's like, all right, so I got to go into this now. Now the union's going to grieve it because you didn't get the complaint, but you still got to go through the process without the complaint. And, it's got serious star chamber types of circumstances. And then, so you start ratcheting up these, these highly dubious kinds of findings, but they're taken as being valid. And that's going to be the other kind of difficulty with my case, is that, harassment isn't what people think it is. Like, people think of harassment, you think of someone who's in a position of authority berating someone and making it impossible for that person to pursue their workplace goals and everything. That's sort of what it is. Now it's, you say something on social media that no one has to even look at, that someone thinks demeans their perspective.
You wouldn't be the first person to get fired for saying things on social media, though. That's not out of the blue. So you were sort of willingly playing with fire, I guess, here. But does that that this is just an expression of your belief in free speech, et cetera? Is that?
Well, the social media, that's kind of another interesting area, is that social media, and I've looked at a few of these cases on social media. The university system is, so people who criticize their employer on social media, there's been cases like that. But at the university, we're allowed to criticize our employer, like we're supposed to, if we feel that our employer is not upholding academic standards. All my stuff that was directed at colleagues on social media was in response to their attempts to get me fired. So I'm going, well, they're trying to get me fired, and I'm just satirizing their attempts to get me fired. So I don't understand why I'm the one who's being, pushed out.
Yeah.
Like what? So they're not consistent at all in how they're, and as I said, I was putting up with it because I thought, this is the price you pay for. I don't want to start getting the Mount Royal going and looking and monitoring everyone's social media accounts. But, it is causing me some problems because a trans activism discussion. So when we had the Rational Space Network held, I guess that's one of the things that started it as well, was Rational Space Network had an event called with the question, does trans activism negatively impact women's rights? With Megan Murphy and Julie Ray Goldstein, who is a trans activist, and Megan Murphy is a critical of trans activism. Anyway, some professors were saying on social media that this was, denying the humanity of trans people and so on. And I had students who were being mobilized by these professors. And I could see this was not going to go in a good direction, because these students, rather than being told, look, although you have your identity that is dear to you, this is an academic institution, and we should be able to talk about the implications of trans activism. That never really happened. And in fact, it was like, well, we got to be really concerned that, trans people feel that they're not being respected at Mount Royal. And that was kind of like what was going on. And so that was kind of, you could sort of feel this kind of starting to happen. And it's difficult when you're a free speech advocate to deal with this, with active attempts to undermine you, because you sort of hope that the administration is going to stand firm in the end when it starts to come down, which it did, but they don't.
Yeah. When was the Megan Murphy event?
That was
Did it happen?
March 2019.
All right. Oh, that's ways away. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the thing. That was sort of the, and I could see that unfolding. I was kind of going on, I don't really like this very much, but I didn't want to stop it. He's like, what am I going to do? Like, they're entitled to say, saying that for people born with XX chromosomes or women, and that is dehumanizing to trans, like that's their view, and fine. But the problem is that they use that to say you should be pushed out because you're a hate monger and you're engaged in discrimination and you're engaged in doing all these things, when you're not making any policy pronounced. You're not saying trans people should, not be allowed to do this or that or whatever. You're just saying, look, is it true that women at the high elite level of sports, XX chromosomes, there's a huge gap in many sports between people born with XX and people born with XY. And if you're going to allow the XYs who think they're women to compete in the women's sports, you're not going to have any women's sports anymore. Like, that's what's going to happen. Perhaps, maybe not, but you're not saying, you're not making any policies, but still that's said to be discriminatory because it could result in policies that discriminate against people. So that's kind of where we're going now. And this is people are talking about this a bit. And so that's kind of what happened with that event, and that kind of carried on. And then I did something, I did some activities with respect to trying to stop people from being able to, well, not stop, they could go ahead, but I wanted to raise the alarm about how that was going to damage the intellectual environment. Like, I was trying to, and that was then seen as being inappropriate, or at least allegations were made that, and this is sort of been, and this has kind of been, so that's the workplace kind of stuff, the actual workplace stuff.
So just to be, I'm just trying to get my head around the actual trigger for your dismissal. So was there one particular complaint, or did this administration just say, oh my God, we've got a whole filing cabinet full of complaints about Francis Widdowson, it's time to, like, I'm just trying, what was on the administrative side, what was the administrative procedure used to fire you?
Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of stuff, like, all together.
Yeah. It was a perfect storm of multiple.
It was like progressive. First of all, it's progressive. So if you get nailed early on, and it's unjust, like, no one, like, I think it's highly unjust what happened early on. But I had to go through it, and it continues because you have to grieve it after the fact, and it has to go to arbitration, which takes 2 years. So in the meantime, you ratchet up all sorts of other. So it just goes like 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, you're out, like this. It's like, wait, the 1 strike that wasn't valid. It's like, that doesn't matter. So that's kind of what you're faced with. And this is kind of one of the difficulties is some collective agreements say if there's ever a dispute, processes are paused till you sort out the dispute, which seems to me to be the way it should be. But that's not what happens at Mount Royal. Things continue even though you're disputing it.
So there was sort of cascading complaints against you.
Yeah.
And you were in the process of arbitrating earlier ones when further ones. And was this in your mind a concerted plan, or was this merely the a bunch of disparate people all being upset with you at the same time, or was it a coordinated effort to inundate the system with complaints?
It's unknown, but they're all interacting with one another on social media, so they all know one another. They're all supporting one another. So they could just be acting independently, and it happens that
Sure.
they just
so how many complaints were outstanding complaints against you are there?
I don't know, because
Like
it was told, but there's a whole bunch of complaints. I haven't seen. They're just kind of, people are complaining. People have left Mount Royal because of you. There's a whole bunch, not just like people, members of the public are complaining about you. And I don't know what, I can imagine what they are because of my social media. Like I on the social media, the Francis McGrath character.
Yeah.
I did a few really edgy satirical attempts, but I thought that because I wasn't directing them at the MRU community, and I was like, people say that's not academic freedom, you doing, but I was trying to speak the truth through satire, so I can defend it, what I was trying to do from a truth-seeking perspective. And what I was doing is that there was a whole bunch of historians, not MRU historians, but you probably heard about the Canadian Historical Association.
Yeah.
And this is what was going on, which was absolutely ridiculous. And anytime you would try to say, hey, what about the tuberculosis and that sort of thing, you'd be told you're a genocide denier and all this kind of. So one professor who was at Mount Royal, but he's no longer there, he kept on, like, he started to go after people celebrating Canada Day, which, like, and I'm not a Canadian nationalist. I never celebrated Canada Day in my life. I don't really care about Canada Day, to tell you the truth. But I know the kinds of people who do celebrate Canada Day, which are, ordinary people who take their kids out to go look at some fireworks.
Sure.
Anyway, he was saying these people are disgusting doing this. They're genocide. They're celebrating genocide. They're doing this, blah, blah, all this kind of, I'm going, blah. So, and then at the same time, these unmarked graves things were happening, which of course, the Cowessess one was a cemetery associated with the community. It was next to a hospital, like people who from the hospital were buried there. It had nothing, and everyone knew that it was no discovery. It was just complete bullshit what was going on. So I said something like, if you're going to celebrate Canada Day after hearing about the killing fields at the Cowessess whatever, you are a disgusting genocide minimizer or something like that. And then I said, why don't you celebrate Hitler's birthday while you're at it, you disgusting ghouls, or something like that, like using the language of this. And then I put a swastika on the Canadian flag as the But I was mocking these historians who were ridiculing the Canada people and also the bullshit about the 751.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not, it was totally made up and it's all rent seeking and everything like that. Well, that got a lot of people very angry, that tweet. And they said I was mocking dead children. It's like, I'm not, you guys don't understand what you're talking about here. I'm mocking, and you're minimizing the Holocaust. It's like, I'm going, I'm mocking people who are making a comparison, like people who are saying that 751, you know, where the crosses are blown away is the same as Auschwitz. They're the ones minimizing the Holocaust, so that was not understood at all. And everyone went nuts about that, and that caused all sorts of problems. But I was sort of going, well, you know, I'm not directing at any member of the MRU community, and I'm doing edgy satire about this idiocy that's going on with the Canadian Historical Association and the, you know, that, and I'm trying to expose how silly it is what they're talking about. That's what I'm doing, and like whatever, like no, but that was kind of one of the notches.
Were these mentioned? Did you get some sort of formal package terminating you that listed all these sins, or?
Well, they weren't specific. They were very generic.
So you had to kind of figure out what it was that were the triggers, or?
Yeah, so it's like, you know, you're a harasser, you're this, you're that, you know, you've like, it's like, I don't, first of all, I think the whole stuff about harassment is completely fabricated.
Yeah.
There's no harassment under any definition that it used to exist. And the whole standard is completely different depending upon what context you're talking about. So they're not clear. They never told me anything about, like, this is kind of the endless sort of thing. And I think if it doesn't get overturned at arbitration, then something's seriously wrong with the system. But in the meantime, it's kind of being implied all over the place that I was this horrible kind of person who was, you know, going around the hallways of Mount Royal, castigating,
pushing people into the water fountains and stuff.
Which, like, anything that was a little bit edgy and not, you know, yeah, I wouldn't be doing it at work. Like, I wouldn't be in the workplace, you know, being sarcastic like I was being on social media. Like that, I was doing social media as a private citizen, and although, you know, I can kind of concede that, you know, I maybe shouldn't be directly mentioning my colleagues there, which I'm happy to comply with. I don't need to, as long as they're not doing stuff to me, which, you know, it should be applied equally. I'm happy not to, you know, mention them in my satirical stuff.
Right.
But the point is that in the end, that didn't matter anyway, because my satirical letter saying, you know, just a kind of generic thing about how this is kind of ridiculous, this anti-racism training. And these people are, if they really want to put their money where their mouth is, they obviously should resign, since, like, no one's going to give up these wonderful tenured positions for other people. So you're never going to get the BIPOC scholars in there in the numbers if you're going to be taking that seriously, which I, you know, as a person who values merit, I don't think we should be hiring people on the basis of identity anyway, but they're the ones who are arguing that we should hire people on the basis of identity.
Yeah.
So I'm just exposing their hypocrisy, not to individually, but just as a general kind of thing they're doing. But because they could find this demeaning, that I'm satirizing this thing, then that's harassment, you know. Well, I don't think that's harassment in any way. And if we're going to apply that standard to everyone, then we're going to clear out the universities, because that's people are doing stuff like that all the time and no one cares. But when I do it, people care, because it's kind of one of those gotcha, it's sort of a gotcha moment where they're trying to they're trying to consolidate a dossier, some kind of, points in a criminal trial of what I've, what is it? What is that? And like when you've got these charges that you're all these
Your docket?
different counts.
Yeah,
They put all these counts together. So that's kind of the picture. So I think there's kind of two components of it. One was the pre-attempts to get me fired period, where I was just asking questions. I was never sarcastic. I was never whatever. And everyone really took great umbrage at me relentlessly asking questions, which they thought should have ended, years ago when we decided this was the course of action we were going to be going on. And then when I did the defense of Wendy Mesley, that then led the mob to mobilize, and then they tried to get me fired for doing that. And then I tried to defend myself from being fired, from people trying to get me fired. And then that was basically, I was told that I can't defend myself. That's generally what Mount Royal is saying. So
Yeah.
I don't think that is at all a fair kind of, the whole thing is completely unfair, but that's kind of the problem with this wokeism, reified postmodernism, is that the standard for me is different than the standard for an Indigenous scholar. So an Indigenous scholar can, basically defame me all over the place. No one cares because they're, punching up. They're punching up at me, and me defending myself from trying to get fired is me punching down on them. And there was quite a few instances where the allegation anyway was that by me demanding evidence for their defamation, that was harassment of them. That's what they claimed. Like this kind of stuff is like, well, how on earth under any, sort of rational kind of way of thinking about this could that possibly be the case? Like, obviously I'm not the aggressor. I'm just reacting. I'm trying to, and I'm not even trying to stop them. I'm just saying, look, if you're going to call me a pathetic racist or a white supremacist or a epistemic terrorist and all these sorts of things, then, how am I? Like, what is your evidence for that? And they would never do it. They would never provide any evidence of any of these things. They would just kind of see it as being self-evident. And the fact that I would ask questions about what the basis was for that, they would see as evidence of more ill intent and, relentlessness and, what was the other sort of things, all these kinds of accusations. Like, it's more indications of my moral failings. Anyway.
Is it and again, can you share the letter that the university sent you or anything like that?
I don't think so, because the problem with the university letter is that taken at face value, people go, yeah, well, she should but the whole thing is made up. So it's like,
okay, well, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so just as an example, I'll just give you an example. So I was at a meeting where some professor said they were wondering how they could make Mount Royal safe for Indigenous scholars, because Indigenous scholars had left due to lack of safety, which I assumed was being referring to me, like me asking questions and whatever. That was unsafe. So how could we make it so it'd be more safe? So at that point, when I heard that, I thought, I'm gonna have to ask a question about this, because that
worked out so well in the past.
I can't, I know this is being kind of directed at me, and I want to, and I'm not going to say, I know. So I said, what about I went on to ask, I just published an edited volume on indigenizing the university, diverse perspectives. There was a chapter in there by Massimo Pigliucci, who's a very well-known international skeptic, who argued that indigenous science, there is no such thing as indigenous science. There's science and there's not science. And if you put an adjective in front of science, that is, it's no longer the case. And so I said, so for example, I have this edited volume, and this argument is being made in the volume. Is this seen as being unsafe? Would this be seen as being unsafe for Indigenous scholars? That was the question. And so I wasn't even saying I don't accept Indigenous science. I just think I'm trying to allow for people to, but what is your view? At that point, this Indigenous scholar gets up and says that he is very insulted by what I've said, and that it's laughable. This is laughable to say that there's no such thing as Indigenous science. Everyone knows that Indigenous science is a well-established thing. It's just contributed tremendous things, blah, 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 blah. So I'm sitting there. So we have the chat function at these meetings. And like the chairs just let him go ahead and like basically be totally uncivil behavior and everything. We just had this big long lecture about how we're all supposed to be civil. And so, and no one's doing anything about it or anything. And I guess I should have said, point of order or something like that, but I didn't. Because everyone's using the chat for, congratulations of this, and like they're just using it for their whatever. So I just put 2 words in the chat: insulting ? Laughable ? I put those 2 words in the chat. Well, everyone just about 6 faculty members went after me and started saying, yes, you were insulting, and then a guy, it's like it's kind of being implied that I'm just negative. I've got these negative things I'm putting in there. And then this guy gets up and he says, this is nonsense. Francis is, she can have her events, but I've got to listen to this nonsense that she's saying it, blah, blah, blah. I'm going, what? Like, what is going on here? So I said, I'm going to speak now. And this is just like, this is totally unacceptable. What's going on? We're being told we're supposed to be civil. And then this person says, that this is nonsense. What I'm talking is completely on point. You're talking about safety, and I'm saying, what about this situation? Anyway, so that was seen to be harassment, my doing this. And then I went through an investigation, which was one of the charges against me. So I had recorded this meeting and the chat. I had it all recorded. So I read out to the investigator that it was not me. I was not the one who was causing the problems here. I was just being perfectly civil and was just bringing this as an example. And as well, the Indigenous science stuff was being brought up as part of harassment kind of stuff. So some people were under the impression that saying Indigenous science didn't exist was harassment and so on. Anyway, the investigator found that I was not, that was fine what I did. And it was actually the other people who were the problem. So he, after listening to the recording and look, he decided, now of course he got me on on other things, but that one I was not, I was fine with that one. Anyway, the Mount World put that in as one of the reasons. So that was one of the reasons, is that I had disrupted this meeting so much that the chat function had to be disabled because of me. And I was like, I was like, this is even under your own Star Chamber kinds of findings. That's not one of them. So you're just inventing stuff. You're just making stuff up now. So like that, and then, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well that is like that. And so if you have these, if people see all these things that Mount Royal's made up, they're gonna go, well, it's a good thing she's gone. Like, she's just doing all these things. She's created a culture of fear. She's got all these complaints saying people are leaving Mount Royal because of her. Like on and on and on and on and on. When, it's all, the problem is not me. The problem is these identity politics, totalitarians who think that if you question their idea, that this idea is so deeply held by them that their identity is being undermined.
Sure. And I don't want to take up, we've been here an hour almost. I want to switch to a little more of a generalities, just to talk about sort of the effect on universities. We talked about that quite a bit last time, but just, when we talked last time, you said, I think, thank God there's tenure. I wouldn't be here if there wasn't tenure. Has tenure become a bit of a dead letter if there's now these sort of, workarounds to it? What are your thoughts on that kind of erosion of the problematic academic, and how has things even changed in the last 2 years?
Yeah, no, it's over. It's over. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that there's some universities out there, there's pockets where it's taken seriously. So that's one possibility. But there's still places where you can be controversial and provocative, and it's kind of an important part of the truth-seeking kind of exercise, because if you stop people from being controversial and provocative, then you're going to kind of cut off that kind of gray area. Like, it's better to allow more to be on the safe side than to pull it back. Like, I know you're going to have to put up with some stuff, like, the Canadian flag with the swastika on it and stuff like that on Twitter, which is not at work. I understand if you put a poster up on your, the blackboard or whatever, or like that, with that, like, that's you're on the workplace. But if you're just on social media, like, this is not, but anyway, but still, like, that's a bit, I understand that's a bit edgy, but I'm being edgy for a reason. Like, I can defend it. So, I should be allowed to do that.
What are the, in some ways, the standard workplace rules are being imposed on the university, but does the university play some kind of special role that would make one argue, the regular workplace rules might not apply? The role of the university as a bulwark against, the threats to democracy and its crucial function in pursuit of truth and free speech and stuff. Is there a bit of a perversion there in using the kind of rules that are applied, at the landscaping company, and applying them to the university?
Yeah, because the university first of all, we are able to criticize our employer. So any other workplace, that's not part of your rights, your employment rights. It's not. So that's the one thing. The second thing is with colleagues, there's gonna be more jostling because of the things that you're gonna get into. So, if you're working, as you said, in the landscaping company, you're not going to start having one person criticize the other person's religious beliefs. Like, you're not going to start talking about religion and how religion is harmful for society, and like those that's going to be seen as not a good thing to be happening amongst employees in the workplace, to be doing that. And whereas in the university, that would be an idea, which we have actually had some quite difficult moments at Mount Royal about religion, and whether religion is harmful or not, and those kinds of questions. But those are not the sorts of things that you would be talking about in a non-academic kind of workplace, and people tend to stay away from those sorts of things. in a non-academic workplace, whereas in an academic workplace, that is seen as being one of the areas that you would explore. And so what's happened with the university, so that's a big part. So you bring in all these policies, which are not really designed for the academic space, the intellectual space, and they're being applied. So that's one problem. The second problem is and this is, I think, what's really going on in a lot of these things, is the universities now are become brand managers. So they've got a brand and they're very concerned about their brand, and they engage in reputation management. So that was one of the other things that I've ruined the reputation of Mount Royal University. And we knew about this because they tried to have this code of conduct imposed upon us in, I guess it was 2015, and we all fought back against it because we knew if they were going to have the reputation of the university as being one of the things that they could hold you to, anything that a bunch of people don't like that you're saying is going to now be seen that way. So this is now being brought in because Mount Royal has a brand of its brand is "you belong here." That's its brand. Now, of course, that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
I don't belong. Everyone is kind of agreed. Well, not everyone. Sorry, I have a lot of supporters.
Sure.
They're just not very vocal. They're watching it and not knowing really what to do at this stage about it all. But but the people who are vocal don't think I belong there. I don't really. I'm kind of agnostic about their I think they're kind of wreaking havoc, but I would never say they should be fired or anything like that. Yeah. I would always say, well, let's have another discussion and let's try and figure this out. That would be my approach to it. So that was kind of the funny thing about it is that, or one of the funny things is that, I am saying everyone belongs, and they're saying only some people belong, but they're pretending that they're the real inclusive types and I am some kind of exclusive type when I'm saying university is a space where everyone can be there. And now, of course, if you're going to start to poison the environment for people, then you make it difficult for certain people to express views. But we need to kind of talk about that and figure out how to deal with that. So that's the corporatization of the university is now a huge problem. And there's very few universities that have been able to continue in a true academic sense without being worried about donors or,
Sure.
How they're perceived and these sorts of things.
In your mind, what are where do your loyalties lie then as an academic? To what concepts or what promotion of what values? When you were as an academic, when you sit there as an academic, who is it that you owe loyalty to, or what concepts do you owe loyalty to?
The truth.
Yeah.
So that's my loyalty. And so I'm going to go down, I guess that's where we're at. I'm hoping, that there's universities out there or departments within universities who appreciate my position, but I'm not going to sacrifice that. I've decided I'm not going to sacrifice that. I'm going to talk about Mount Royal University as a case of where Mount Royal started out in 2008 when I was there as a fantastic institution which showed great promise, and that was what I was looking forward to, and I started doing a bunch of the things that I was doing because of that promise. We had a great provost, Robin Fisher was the provost, great dean, Manuel Merton was a dean, and they understood the academic kind of mandate of the university. And so everything looked very promising in 2008. And then over time, the corporatization of the university has begun to take hold. And that's I've got an interesting piece that's coming out in the SAFS newsletter this month. It should be out in a few days, where I'm talking about the the intersection between the corporatization of the university, which is, some call it diversity managerialism. So you have brand managers who are trying to, get professors to behave in a manner that supports their brand. And so that's very obviously very corrosive to academic freedom, that kind of mentality. And then you've got a segment of the professors who are reified postmodernists or totalitarian identity politics. And they are also very corrosive to academic freedom and open inquiry. There is an unholy alliance between those two elements in the university, which is not going to hold together for long, because the brand managers are kind of accepting the totalitarian identity politics people because they like the arbitrariness of their framework. Because these people, like the totalitarians, like they want punish.
Yeah.
They want to get you. So they're going after me that way. But the administration, they're kind of afraid of those people because they can cause all this ruckus and all these problems. But they like their arbitrariness, so they're using that against people like me. But it's not going to be long before those totalitarian identity politics people step out of line and start to tarnish the brand in some way. And then they're going to be hauled before the Star Chamber, just like people who have been, so this is kind of, I think, is going to be the future of the university, unless the actual academics, wake up, like there are a number of them there, but they're not really very mobilized, and they kind of think they're going to escape it if they just do their own thing and not going to worry about it. And they're cowardly, very cowardly people, many of them,
Sure.
and so on. But like they have a, like this is not going to work. If they have any academic sense, it's not going to work. The system is not going to work if they want an actual academic institution. It's going to fall apart. It will not be a university anymore. So people have to sort of realize that, and I'm not sure, I have, my optimistic moments and my pessimistic moments about all this. But all I can do is, fight my own, like take the principled stance and play it out, see it out, play, although it is very, psychologically, psychologically disturbing, I guess, because, you sort of feel like someone who's fighting the Catholic Church, I guess, and it's Martin Luther. You sort of feel like a little bit like Martin Luther, and you hope that, there's going to be some supporters that are going to be strong enough to stop you from being burnt at the stake, I guess,
Sure.
So that's where
two more questions and I'll let you go. Is one, just to go back to when I asked you, who did your loyalty lie with? You said it was the truth. Where is the loyalty of your critics? To what is it that they're, other than, this vague concept of wokeism, what is it? What's the grander plan there?
Yes, well, there's a variety of different kinds of personality types. There's the opportunists. Their loyalty is to themselves and their own careers, and they see this as a good strategy to increase their power. Sure. And I know some people like that, like who are they actually are not the ones who you see. They're behind the scenes, and they've got these crazy people that they're crazy sock puppets that they are deploying against you. But there's people that the true believer, like the true believers, and I guess their loyalties are to who they perceive as being the downtrodden. So they want, well, I guess I've on this, Francis McGrath calls them brave white savior, the brave white saviors, those kinds of types who are, they actually want to really change things in the university to elevate the dispossessed, the oppressed, and so on. But that's a very difficult one, because as we talked about in the last interview, that the sands are constantly shifting. So if you're in favor of one kind of oppressed element, then it's possible that something's going to happen where they're no longer on the bottom of the heap. And so now they're the oppressor and you're backing the wrong oppressed element. Like that seems to be going on. So there's all these, interscene warfare going, like there's all this kind of, ripping apart, all these kinds of things ripping apart, because it's not really a set of ideas that focuses on commonalities. So, but the university is not really a good, like that's although I'm a historical materialist, which I think I take seriously the labor theory of value and class politics and so on, I would hate to see a quote unquote Marxist university or something like that's not really what the university is for. Like we shouldn't be having these, whatever the ideologies are, imposing themselves on the university. The university is about the pursuit for, creating the conditions where people can pursue the truth. And if historical materialism is true, then that will be discovered through that process. But you have to be willing to give that up if it's found not to be true. So that's really my kind of approach. And I really think that people who are trying to make the university into some kind of, political training ground of some kind, or indoctrination sort of element, or activist, like the activists, like, you can be an activist, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't expect the university itself to be activist. That's kind of when I've really seen the danger there with all these initiatives and all these declarations. I even if I agree with those declarations, I don't want the university to be doing that, because it makes it seem as if the matter is settled, when things are never settled in the university. Things are always being discussed and figured out and so on. And what seems to be right today is likely to be wrong or it's probably, part of it anyway is going to be wrong tomorrow. So that's kind of a big, huge mistake. So that's kind of that. I think that's what's happening.
But that leads nicely into my final question, was I mentioned before we got a article, a submission that was much more theoretical, and we thought maybe we could sort of marry your situation with it. And in that one, it was a lot about Robert Conquest and Hannah Arendt and the totalitarian urges. And one of the criticisms that the editors had was, it's a big leap to go from universities to Pol Pot and the killing fields. But you were using terms like your totalitarian critic. So how would you link this horrible history we have of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century with what's going on in universities now, without sort of indulging in hyperbole? What is what are the actual risks involved beyond some academics losing their jobs? Not to belittle anything, but draw the line between these two sort of linked things that involve quite a large leap.
Yes. Well, the reason why I call these identity politics proponents it's becoming totalitarian is because for two reasons. One is that they're really trying to transform. They've got this kind of transformative kind of idea, which is very common in totalitarian regimes. Like that's how totalitarianism is distinguished from just a dictatorship. Like, the Duvaliers, they just robbed and plundered and everything. They didn't really care about whether, what words you were using to refer to people. And 1984, George Orwell, who I guess if I were to say someone who I felt myself most aligned with would be his kind of ideas. But he kind of gets at that with 1984. Like 1984 was talking about this kind of shaping thoughts. And then you have what he called the proles that no one really bothered very much about, but the kind of the bureaucrats and the intellectual, like that's where the kind of 1980, like that kind of thought control and everything was really working on. So that's why I called them totalitarians, because of that mindset. In terms of the wider society, that's an interesting question, and I'm still kind of trying to work that out. I think John Stuart Mill had some, and it's difficult because you have it was the vaccines, I guess, is where I think this is an interesting thing to think about. And I had a lot of arguments with a whole bunch of people, because like on the one hand, some things you need to control people's behavior in the interests of the society, in societal interests, and you're not going to get there just by allowing individuals to do whatever they want. It's not going to be possible to have everyone doing what they want, and you arrive at the social benefit. But the danger comes when you don't have that ability to question, like that ability to question is closed off. And we have to be very, very careful about that in a society, to have openness. Like, even though we have to sometimes have laws to force people to do things, and I understand the need for that, we need to be able to have people to listen to the people who are questioning it, and not say, no, you can't question, because then that's going to feed into the hands of so and so and so and so, and then we're not going to be able to achieve our, and I think that's a very difficult I like that needs a lot of thought as to how, those kinds of restrictions, and what we're seeing now is people move far too quickly on the restrictions of people being able to criticize them. And the university is kind of I guess it's the bit of the canary in the coal mine, because like you don't make policy, so you should have much more freedom than other elements in society. Like it's understood that that's kind of if you start to close that off, where is the openness? Where is any dissent, or where's that going to be able to happen? Like for people to be able to put it out there in a manner that's not going to get shut down. Like, and we see that now all over the place with, these social media companies, is that, people think they have this audience that they can communicate with, and then these social media companies go in and just take away your account and do this, and so that's very unstable. But with the universities, it used to be very, very hard to do that, very difficult. But my case, I'm really hoping, I like people who just think who cares, some egghead, got, good riddance, because like they're all a bunch of, eating off the fat of the hardworking people. I think my case is more than anything. I've seen other cases, but they're not public, that are probably worse than mine. But of all the public cases, I think mine is probably the worst. Oh no, well, there's a guy by the name of Derek Pine. He's still there though. He hasn't been fired yet. But he, I'm not sure if you know about his case. His is just purely academic, and he was criticizing his colleagues for publishing in predatory journals.
Oh yeah.
And he got slammed. Like I can't believe what they've done to him.
Where is he at?
Thompson Rivers University.
Oh, yeah.
That's the worst case I've heard of someone who's done, like, I understand why people are going after me, because I call it bare testicle clamping. Because people say, you're poking the bear, you keep on poking the bear. So no, I'm not poking the bear, I'm testicle clamping the bear. Because I'm not going to take this bullshit. And, as long as I'm not in the workplace and I'm just doing it as a kind of societal, like my individuality in society, I really don't think people should be trying to stop me from doing this, or trying to get me fired because I do it. So, but I understand why people are angry about it and demanding. But with Pine, it was totally like, he was doing everything he should have done. Like, there's no one can argue with him about this. But because his union is just such a disgrace and hasn't defended him properly, and he's got all these, he doesn't have any supporters where he is. He's just, but he's still there. He hasn't been actually fired
Sure.
yet, but still, that was really bad. But still, I think I resorted to the satire when I felt that the rational arguments were not working. So, and I can sense that is that if I just try to make rational arguments, I can't get any traction because people just ignore them. Whereas if I do kind of edgy satire that is truthful, because, like when people tell people who want to celebrate Canada Day that they're a disgusting genocide minimizer and so on, and pretend that it's somehow like you're celebrating Hitler's birthday or something like that. That's just, I think that's really just bullshit. And I'm gonna kind of, this is what you got. This is sort of what you're doing. Like, I'm exaggerating it slightly, or maybe a lot, but I'm exaggerating what they're doing and trying to shed some light on it. That is when people, get irate and start reacting. And I say, good, good, they're reacting. But, I'm flying close to the sun.
Yeah.
Which I should be able to do. Like, I'm not doing this. No one has to look at my Twitter account. Like, just don't look at it. Like, why are people insisting that I, should apologize and I should do this and I should do that? Like, I'm not telling them that they're stupid things. Like, not telling these historians that they should, shut up and not post their stuff and whatever. Like, it's like, why just let it play out?
Is it just when in the back and forth on Twitter, to what extent you're anonymous but easily discernible. Is it always known to you who your opponents are, or is it
No.
how many of the people you've harassed have been anonymous when they got harassed? Like when you responded to them? Is that
none are like, there were two anonymous accounts. I tried to, because 3 people outed themselves with the anonymous account.
okay?
And so I went after them for that. But I didn't know if they have plausible deniability on that, because I don't know if they were the ones posting that I was a white supremacist and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but if you're gonna go through the complaint stuff, you've got to be named. Well, they haven't, except for my general charges, which I've been told those, all sorts of complaints have been filed, which I've never heard about. Everything else was people had to put their name on it. So that was one that was one kind of thing. So that's it was more the poisoning, like that's what it started, is that the anonymous accounts, they started, I guess, in about June 2020. So the anonymous account started, and I was very worried about that, because I knew that they were going to be used to defame me without me being able to defend myself. But that was not, that didn't proceed on that basis for the complaints, the anonymous, except in a very general kind of, all these people you've got all these complaints that have been filed against or that have been made. So a complaint is, there's 2 types of, one is like someone writes a letter to Mount Royal University, which I'm sure there are lots. I haven't done a freedom of information request on it, but there's been a number of controversies, and some were not even the satirical stuff. There was a guy by the name of Armin Navabi who was coming to speak about that Islam couldn't be reformed, and his talk was canceled, which led to a huge controversy. And I tried to rebook his talk with 2 other Rational Space Network members, and a whole bunch of Islamic propagandists started, sending nasty emails into phone calls and all sorts of angry things because I wasn't going to allow his talk to be canceled, or I was going to fight against his talk to be canceled. So there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened about that. And then I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened about the trans activism stuff, but that was all, pretty much mainstream academic freedom types of issues. Not, when I put a swastika on a Canadian flag, or the Klan, that was the other one. I was doing the Klansman type of thing. Like that was just, just pretending that Canada Day supporters were really wanting to burn crosses and do that kind of stuff. Right?
So has your academic work ceased to become controversial simply because your extracurricular activity is so much more? Do you feel, for a while there, people were saying they're not going to, do peer reviews and stuff because of your academic published work. Is it ironically become less controversial now simply because all the heat has been shifted to your Twitter account, or is that?
I think it's actually, I think, more controversial than ever. It's just ignored. So that's ignored.
Yeah.
The university, of course, like that's why they really like the social media stuff, is because they like people are freer on social media and do what's considered to be more unprofessional and uncivil and uncollegiate, like all these kinds of, your personality is kind of can be looked at in terms of whether your tone, like the nature of your tone and these sorts of things. So that that's why they like social media. But I think
when you say you mean that's why they're focusing more on it?
So they get you on it. Like that's what they can get you on, where it's much harder to get you on the academic stuff. The interesting thing is these meetings that they're getting me on, because of my relentless and what is it? That was one charge. The other charge was, this is just something I heard someone saying, ill intent. I'm doing it to, because I don't really, I'm not actually interested in the answer. I'm interested in showing how this is bullshit through my questions, but I don't ask it in a sarcastic way. But I, like, for example, in the recent interview that someone was doing, the question that I asked, which was very pointed, was because this person talking about indigenous epistemologies, whatever that is, which no one seems to be able to see. And I said, so it's like epistemology is examining how we know what we know. So the study of how we know what we know. So I said, ask the question, how do indigenous epistemologies distinguish between true and false beliefs? That was the question. Anyway, the person answering it went through this long, this long rambling answer that no one can possibly understand, and basically came down to, if I feel it's true, it's true. That was basically what. So that can't, in the academic setting, we can't, that can't be something that is entertained, because that means there's no standard. It's just like I woke up. But I think that question exposed the idiocy of it all. But it was perfectly civil. It was just crafted really well. Like, so that's what I kind of been working on, is, to craft the perfect question. But that's hard to do, especially if you've got to do it quickly. And like and you got to do it really short. You got to have a short question because otherwise they'll cut off part of it and they won't ask it and all these kinds of things.
Well, even asking questions now is
Yeah.
that's
the quest. The questions are relentless and asked with ill intent.
Yeah.
So
anyways, well, that's kind of an hour and a half here.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's what I mean. This one's not going to be as long as our last one, so I probably that's probably wasted enough of your time.
I can go forever, as you know. I don't care. It's fine with me. The thing is, it makes it harder for you because you've got to kind of compress.
Yeah, I got to transcribe it all. So when do you hope to go to arbitration, or what's the sort of the near term prognosis?
Well, the grievances started going forward in June of 2021. So it's been 6 months already, which is a good thing because everything else is going to be lumped in. The problem, what I know is going to happen though, is that the university will drag its feet on it because the university, of course, has endless resources that it can devote to it. And it's hoping I'm going to get, demoralized. And, and that'll make me, kind of eager for some settlement of some kind. I'm sure that's what they're planning. But there will be no plea bargain. It's going to go the distance because I want all these documents to be out. I want everyone to be able to see these documents. And, right now it's kind of a bit dicey releasing stuff, but
sure, gotcha.
If it's arbitration, then everyone can get a bit of a look at what's happened. And hopefully, I'm just the only kind of concerns I have is that, you have to have good arbiters in there. Like, I don't know exactly what that's going to be like. And as well, you have to have the point argued.
Right.
The point has to be argued well by the union's lawyer. And
Sure.
it's a complicated case.
Certainly.
It's got the social media stuff, and it's got all the administrative law stuff, and then it's got the labor, all these sorts of things, and that's got to be, there's all these documents, and you can kind of get lost in all the details without understanding the fundamental principles. So the hope is it's going to be within the year. So it's going to be a year.
Sure.
Another
And
year.
so just to be clear, the grievance in June 2021, is that something you've initiated, or that's been initiated against you?
No, they're mine. And the union itself. So the union is trying to get all these like there's been serious procedural problems with all of this. And I'm told it's not just me. There's other.
So what is the grievance? What's the nub of the grievances that began in June 2021?
No procedures.
Lack of procedures in disciplinary.
Yeah. So
actions?
like no procedural fairness kinds of things, and just was one example, not giving not providing the complaint, sure. So, and then the other thing is all the disclosure. So you need full disclosure, and that's also going to happen in arbitration. Is the arbiter orders all the things that Mount Royal has been withholding gets to be released. So that's good for me too, because I have all these things which I've never really been able to see in complete form that are I'm told, going to be disclosed at arbitration. So I'll have a much better sense of what all the legal kind of reasoning that was being put forward. I don't even know some of it because it's never been able to see it. So that this is all just unacceptable for if you're going to be putting people through these kinds of processes. You have to have ironclad fairness kinds of things in place, and of course this is totally absent. So those are the first ones, but all the others are going to be lumped in with it. Like they're all going to go together in one big massive package. But I'm going to write a book on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm writing a book on it. Well, I'll do the C2C
sure.
once I get more freedom to talk about all the various things. Then I'll start writing on it. but I'm going to eventually it's going to become a book on, you know, the Mount Royal case study, the kinds of things that sort of led to this, because it was a long time in coming. Took about 13 years for it to finally fall apart. And there's a lot of reasons why that happened. You know, and the indigenization initiative was one of them, was one of the big ones for that to happen. But there's been other things as well.
Okay, well, that's great. So I'll send me what you can, and I'd like to see that the Kamloops piece, although I make no promises because George is nervous these days, but I'd love to take a look at it.
Yeah, no, I think it's excellent. And it's different. It's different than the others, because the others are like Jaime. Actually, Jaime, I know Jaime well, and he's been helping me because he's a stickler.
Sure.
So you know, it's pretty. And Jonathan Kay did fact check it all. He just wanted it to be a different kind of piece than what it was going to be, because I think the hysteria, moral panic idea, I think that's really, I think that's what's going on there. It seems to me like it just is all of a sudden all these, you know, things which are just kind of vague kinds of, you know, allegations which were very murky and everything, and then all of a sudden now it's like this. And now the Fifth Estate thing that I just watched last night, that was more like crazy things being said. So
there's a piece in Atlantic, I think, on the whole child sex trafficking, which is a more recent iteration than the sex abuse thing from Saskatchewan. I haven't. It's the only article.
Michelle remembers. So Michelle remembers was I think it was in the States. So it started in the States. This woman, her name was Michelle. She was in this getting therapy, and she got these memories, these kind of recovered memories. She started to remember. Anyway, these people with the Kamloops thing, it's kind of like that. And Annette, like that was the other thing, is that it's not been directly shown that Annette influenced people. Like Annette was been just kind of had these stories that were going around all over the place, and then, you know, it started to become more and more kind of gaining traction, and now it's like everything else. So there's some tie, but it's not. You have to sort of say in this piece why I did say, you know, these are kind of stories that are circulating, and people who are, you know, kind of slightly emotionally disturbed, slightly disgruntled about everything that has happened, you know, it's possible that's percolating in the system. But no one ever mentioned anything to do with the burials or anything. Like there was like 1988 was one man. This is Annette was involved in that one. And then there's a book, Behind Closed Doors, which had one mentioning of the furnace, stuff to do with the furnace. But that was not an eyewitness account. That was just
I've seen a Facebook or I've seen a YouTube video of some old woman remembering that the priest, you know, took this child and threw it in the furnace, and she remembers the sound of the child. And Sinclair, but Murray Sinclair has repeated that story and saying, you know, this is what we heard, as if it's true because someone remembers it. Anyways, well, I'll look forward to.
Yeah, so I'll send that to you, and I'll, you know, satirical letter. That's public, so I can send you that. Like that's one of that was the most shock for me, the satirical letter being found to be harassment, which is when I knew it didn't really matter anymore what I did. Like it's going to be found to be, you know, like I'm marked. I'm marked for termination or whatever. That was definitely happening, but whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, okay.
Have a good weekend.
That was great talking to you. I really enjoyed that interview.
Oh, good.
Okay, talk to you later.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.